My name is Karen Cedar, Karencedar.
Describe for me how special this island is for people who love nature.
The island is incredibly special. Even if you're not so much a nature lover, this is a great place to start. It's magical. When you walk through, you really feel that you're not in the city of Windsor, that you are someplace unique and different. I want to say it's a very natural experience. As you see, we have lots of dirt trails. Nature is just all around you. You hear the water breaking on the beach. You'll hear the birds singing. We have a catbird singing right now. Yellow warbler singing. All sorts of natural things are surrounding you. The island is always changing. You never know. You'll come day to day and everything will be different. Today we're seeing all kinds of wonderful mushrooms that weren't here 2 days ago. So it's very unique, and I hope people really enjoy their time here.
The trees, the old trees. Talk to me a little bit about those old trees, because we were excited about them.
Yeah, we're very fortunate because on the island, even though its history started off as a sandbar, it has quite a few really interesting trees. We've got some rare things like Kentucky coffee tree and butternut, but we also have some amazing old heritage trees, silver maples and bur oaks, and they're approaching 200 years old. So they're very impressive when you see them.
I would assume those are some of the oldest trees in this area?
They are some of the oldest trees that I've seen, yes.
Okay. And you were talking about mushrooms and poison ivy.
Yes, it is a natural area, so natural areas come with inherent risks. So poison ivy in our area is definitely top of the list for me. So stay on the trail always. But there's also, mosquitoes, things that, biting us, and we haven't seen any ticks on the island, but I always tell people just to be careful just in case.
Okay, Meg, I'm coming down for you, Meg. I'm coming down to you, Meg.
Can you go get a stump?
I just feel bad for Meg here.
No, you're good.
So Drew, could you bring us back to some of the history of when we took over this island and what the original vision was for it?
So back in 1999, the city of Windsor acquired Peche Island from the province of Ontario. The province at the time was disposing of non-core assets, and the city picked it up. And of course, Peche Island is 86 acres. It's a wonderful, very special natural place. And I'm not sure what the plan was at the time. I think the city council today recognized that it was special, that it was important, it was worth investing over $1 million to acquire. And now, fast forward to 2018, where we've had another $1 million that this city council approved to be able to protect the shoreline, to be able to invest in improving the bridges and the dock system and the washrooms and the paths to make it accessible, and buy the boat that makes it accessible to people in the city of Windsor, a place that most people in the city of Windsor have never had a chance to visit.
So who are you targeting when it comes to access to this island?
Anybody who wants to visit Peche Island. I mean, there's no target audience. It's the entire city. And so we are limiting the access. Only 12 people an hour is the number of people that we'll bring over to try and control the impact that the visitation will have. And certainly we have to be able to manage getting people to and from, and so that system's in place. But we want people to have the experience of visiting Peche Island. You wouldn't know when you're here that this is actually part of the city of Windsor. And I would argue that this is probably one of the premier parks in the city of Windsor, just waiting for further development.
Hiram Walker, the history here. I know you're a little bit of a history buff as well too, so what will people see when they come here when it comes to that sort of history?
Well, besides the nature and all of the cool things related to nature here on the island, you'll also have a chance to see the old Hiram Walker ruins. So Hiram Walker had a summer cottage here that he built in the late 1800s that was more than 40 rooms as part of his small summer cottage. Of course, there's also the gardener's house. There were the greenhouses. So you see the foundations of the gardener's house, the greenhouse. You will see the remains of the pump house. And Hiram Walker was responsible for building and digging some of the canals within Peche Island. So it really is an oasis in the city of Windsor. It's a beautiful place, and there's a strong connection to history. And when you cross that Hiram Walker Bridge, I call it the Hiram Walker Bridge. It's really an historic bridge from the 1800s that Hiram Walker built. And the spindles on that bridge mirror the spindles on the Canadian Club Brand Center. And the mold is still there, so we have the ability to replace those spindles with the exact replica of what was built back in the late 1800s.
But his cottage and the ruins of his cottage are no longer visible.
Well, we don't even know exactly where it was. So you have to remember that Peche Island back in 1965 was about 109 acres. Today, 2018, it's about 86 acres. And so just over 50 years, you see the erosion happening to the island, which is one of the reasons that it was so important for the city to step forward and say, we value this place, we want to do some shoreline protection to make sure that it exists for future generations.
You were asked earlier about the possibility of any sort of commercial development here. You mentioned a concession stand, but would there be anything else, or do you want to largely leave it now?
I don't see any commercial development here. So when I talk about development, I mean development in terms of the path system and making it a good city park. I think at some point, if demand warrants, the city could consider starting a concession stand or certainly having a private operator here to run a concession stand, but I wouldn't consider this island a development island for residential or anything else. I would consider keeping it natural, perpetuity.
Back to the shoreline erosion, how important is some of the work that you're doing here? We're seeing some of the stuff back over here, and you can see the water eating away at the island. So,
Yeah, so here's a fair question. People will say, City Council approved $1 million to invest in this island. And they'll come to the island and they'll say, where's the $1 million? And they know they got on a boat that we bought through that fund to be able to bring them to the island, but they're going to say, here's a new dock, here's a new bridge, where else did you spend the money? And when you look around the perimeter of the island that's accessible today, look at some of the clusters of rocks that have been brought in. I mean, you really can't miss them, but you can't underestimate the importance of the work that was done in order to protect the island for future generations. And so just 2 years ago, one of the parts of the path that we walked on to get to where we're standing right now was perfectly fine. Fast forward this year, after heavy winds, that whole path had been eroded and had to be rebuilt. So the erosion control is critical to protect the island for future generations, and it's a big part and a big amount of the money that we've spent this year in order to protect the island.
and tours begin Wednesday at 10 a.m.
So tours will run Wednesdays, Saturdays, and Sundays from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. All of the information that people need to know with respect to visiting